Hello and welcome to Military Mantra. In this interview, we have today Brad Thomas, a former Delta Force operator and a ranger and a musician. And in this interview, we'll try to understand his experience and various learnings that he has from the battlefield. So thanks a lot, Brad, for coming on this session and taking out the time for us.
Thank you for having me. Absolutely. It's great to be able to talk to new people and reach new people and let them know what I'm doing and also answer questions and answer curiosities and things like that. So thanks for having me on.
Thanks a lot, Brad. Brad, if you could, speak about how did you join the military? Because I understand you were initially into music. So how did your life look like before joining military and what was your motivation?
So I didn't have any desire to join the military. As a little kid, wanted to be a fireman.
Okay.
And my father was a PhD doctor, and not a surgeon or medical doctor, but a PhD doctor. And he volunteered as a fireman. It was a volunteer fire captain.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to see, as a little kid, I got to see the camaraderie and, him interacting with his other teammates and things like that. And it probably implanted something on me that made me want to do something with a team, a group of guys that can accomplish great stuff, whatever it might be. So I got out of that for a long time, and I never became a fireman, and was playing music and was really, that was what I wanted to do. And in December of 1989, there were three things that happened that kind of led me to the military. The first thing was the Rangers jumped into Panama during Operation Just Cause. And cable TV was just kind of a thing in my area. And we saw, maybe on CNN or some of the other news networks, we saw, the Rangers kind of on the ground and excitement and things like that. That was the first thing. The second thing was the band that I was in at the time just kind of fell apart. And it led me to a place where, okay, I can either rebuild the band and take another couple of years to find the right people, or I can do something else. And the third thing is a buddy of mine that had joined the Air Force was home. He had gone through basic training and he had gone through his advanced individual training and was home for Christmas break.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me about these guys that came recruiting after basic training that were trying to get him into a unit that rescued downed pilots behind enemy lines. And it sounded exciting to me. So it was kind of all three of those things happening. And I ended up going and talking with the recruiter, and the rest is kind of history in terms of, how that came to be.
Got it. So if you could also speak about, or, walk us through how was, journey of becoming a ranger, because you were a ranger initially, right? So if you could walk us through that.
Sure. I didn't really know, nor did the recruiters back then. They weren't really versed on, what different units did. It was a peacetime military. We weren't at war. And they put a compact disc or a CD into a computer and let me watch a video that was about Rangers.
Mm.
And really, it wasn't about Rangers. It was about Ranger School. And so it looked challenging to me. It looked like it was going to be something cool. And that was, really all I knew about it. I had read as a younger kid, maybe at 12 or 13 years of age, I had read about Rangers in Vietnam and special forces in Vietnam and studies and observation group in Vietnam and things like that. So I knew kind of what they did, but I didn't know really what the modern era Rangers were like. So I went through, my pipeline of training was basic training, AIT. I was an infantry guy, so I went through infantry training. Then I went to airborne school, and then I went to the Ranger indoctrination program. And at the end of that, then they assigned you to a different Ranger battalion. And I picked 3rd Ranger Battalion at Fort Benning because I was kind of tired of moving around and living out of a duffel bag. And I didn't want to do any more moving. So I showed up there in April of 1991.
So, Brad, I also know that you went to Somalia in Mogadishu,
Yes.
on which there is a movie and a book also, Black Hawk Down. So how was that experience of yours?
That's probably a 12-hour podcast in itself. You know, it was, when I talk about Mogadishu and Black Hawk Down specifically, I try and give people information that they wouldn't know watching the movie. And, you know, so if there's a young kid that's watching the movie today, it's very hard to understand that, as an example, we didn't have radios. You know, it wasn't like we could just talk to one another amongst our team or amongst our squad or amongst our platoon. The vehicles had radios, some of the leaders had radios, but even due to the volume of fire and how loud it was, you know, we had a really hard time communicating. That's something that I think people today don't even recognize. Like, we didn't have Peltors. We didn't have the ability to, you know, noise cancel and be able to hear communications clearly. We didn't have a good plan for what happens when things go to shit, and what do? How do we communicate? How do we disseminate information? We didn't have a lot of that information then. So, you know, it was an interesting experience. It was a peacetime military. Most of the people that I was enlisted with in the Rangers, if they were senior leaders, they were, you know, trying a career. But if they were younger, like my age group, my peers, most of the people were there to do 4 years in the Army, get their college paid for through the GI Bill, and get out. And so they were there to do 4 years, get their college paid for. And, you know, maybe there was a chance that you would end up in a conflict like Panama or a conflict like Grenada, but it wasn't like, hey, we're going to war tomorrow because there's a 20-year-long war going on, right? So the whole mind frame was different. We only had physical things, you know, and mental toughness as a gauge to see how people would perform, you know, if they were in combat. And some of it was probably realistic and some of it probably wasn't. So yeah, it was a big eye-opening experience. It caused a lot of change in how we did things. It caused a big change in the equipment we carried, how we carried it. You know, it was a defining moment, I believe, for special operations.
Got it. So Brad, if you could speak about, was this your first combat experience?
Yeah, that was my first combat experience. And like I said, there was really nothing going on at the time. And even you know, you're talking about in the Rangers, there are probably, I don't know, 3,500 Rangers in amongst all the battalions and everything else. And I think that, you know, it was our company, one company of about 100 guys and a platoon from another company that experienced that. So the entire rest of the military, let alone the entire rest of the Rangers, didn't even get to experience it. It was just a very small group of us that went. And, you know, when we came back, it was hard to say, hey, we need to change the way we're doing things, because one small little element experienced something that nobody else got to experience, if that makes any sense.
Got it.
Yeah.
So Brad, how did you decide to move to Delta Force? So how did that shift happen?
When I joined, I can't say that when I joined, I was planning on doing 20 years. It was kind of like, I want to serve at the most elite level that I can serve at. And so my goal, even in joining, was to be a Delta Force. That was my goal. And once I got to the Rangers, I recognized that you can't just be a Delta Force guy. Like, you have to be the best Ranger, you know, to be able to go to selection, to be able to get selected. You have to be the best at what you're doing at the time. So I kind of realized, hey, this isn't something, it's like just joining professional football, right? You can't just join professional football. You start as a little kid and you move your way up, and you know, play in school and grammar school and things like that, right? So I kind of have my sights set on, I'm just going to go play professional football. And that wasn't the case. So it took me about 8 years to get there. And I had worked with them, you know, in Mogadishu, and got to see the way that they did things. And I really liked that, but it solidified my goal of going to selection. So when I got to see it, I didn't, you don't see a lot about Delta Force. So
Mm.
especially back then, there wasn't anything on the internet really about it. And there was no internet. So it's not like you even had a way to look something up. But yeah, that pretty much solidified my decision, and then worked with them closely. I went to Bosnia a couple times,
Mm.
and nothing super exciting there, but I got to work with guys there a little bit more, and went to selection in 1998.
Got it. Brad, I have one question. If you could spend 2-3 minutes on it, how was, in terms of role, Delta Force different from, say, Rangers on Green Beret?
Obviously the combat mission is slightly different. And Delta Force is more geared towards conducting hostage rescue and capturing high value targets and things like that. The Rangers, slightly different mission. They're more of a specialized infantry that can do a lot of different things. They seize airfields and do things like that, which is kind of its specialty. They do a lot of direct action targets, raids, and things like that. So yeah, there's a difference. I think the main difference is the Rangers have privates.
Mm.
And so you can only be as good as your newest guy, right? When you get a brand new guy, he has to fit into the team. You have to get him trained up. You have to get him as good as he can possibly be, as fast as you can, because if you had to go someplace, you got a brand new guy. And Delta Force isn't like that. I was on the same team with 3 other guys for like 5 years.
Mm.
So it's a lot different. When you have a high turnover rate like that, you can't be at the same level. You can't do the same things the same way. So the key difference is how they're funded, how much money they have for training, the type of equipment, how quickly they can respond and change tactics and things like that. And really it comes down to not having privates.
Got it. So what are the various qualities are they looking for when they're selecting you? So is it more of, the physical capabilities, the skills, or is it the mental capabilities? What do you think?
I think it's an even split between physical capability and also what they call cognitive dexterity.
Okay.
And what that means in simple terms is being able to think very quickly and solve problems very quickly. And you can be the best, physical fit guy. That doesn't mean that you have the ability to problem solve quickly on your feet. Delta Force does a whole lot of what they call CQB, close quarter battle. And close quarter battle isn't really a physical thing. It's a mental game. And most people don't think of it that way, but you have to process everything you're seeing very quickly and move to the next thing. Where's the next problem I have to solve? And really that's the key of it. So they're looking for a guy, and I would say they probably lean even more on mental and cognitive dexterity than they do being physically fit.
Got it. So you spoke about, the problem solving, how quickly you can do it. Does it also involve how creatively can you do it? Because sometimes the problems would be difficult, complex. And since you were already a musician, so there was a creative element to it. So what do you think the importance of creativity in a particular human would be? Somebody who's in special forces, according to you?
I don't think that you have to be an artist or a musician or a writer to be successful, but I do think that you need the ability to think outside of just what's presented to you, right? So in America, we say things like it's black or white, and I don't mean skin color, but kind of a very clear defining definition between one thing and another thing. And really what someone who can problem solve quickly and think on their feet does is they fit in that gray zone. Things are very ambiguous, so when I would come into a target, I can see all these things, I can process them, and almost immediately understand that, hey, this isn't a bad guy house. This isn't a bad guy target. I can read things that are going on. I can see people's body language. I can understand what I'm seeing very quickly and kind of solve problems. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
Got it. Got it. So, Brad, if you could also speak about, the most difficult operation or combat experience that you have faced, which you still remember, what would that be?
definitely Mogadishu. And,
Okay.
I was in a number of other gunfights in Afghanistan and Iraq and other places that I went, but um, yeah, nothing was significant the way that Mogadishu was. That
Okay.
was,
But
clearly way above all of the other engagements that I was a part of.
got it. But if you could describe what made it so difficult, is that because you were new to the team, or was it some other reason?
I don't think that the newness was a part of it. I think that it was a huge wake up call being in peacetime military and then being on a battlefield. That was a huge wake up call. But once that initially happened, we got over that very quickly. I think all the things that I kind of mentioned before, we didn't have the right vehicles. We didn't have the right communications. We didn't have the right weapons and night vision devices. We didn't have the ability to navigate, through the city the same way that we did. And so a lot of the things that happened because of Mogadishu, it was a hard lesson to learn, but because of a lot of that, it caused us to shift and change and better equip and things like that, so that when the global war on terror started, we were already kind of, doing things in a more methodical, more meticulous, better equipped, better technology kind of way.
Mm.
And so it really was a defining moment for special operations.
Got it. So, Brad, I have also seen a lot of training goes into, the special forces teams. So do you think this training really actually helps you in combat, or do you feel every combat situation is actually different? You have to act differently for all of them.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah, there were things that I didn't necessarily realize back then that now that I'm older and I can look back at the situation, I see things a little differently. Paying attention to detail, and really, I think it comes down to doing things to the best of your ability, regardless of what it is. So if someone says, "Hey, Brad, I need you to sweep the floor," I can do that very quickly and easily, or I can do it the best that I can. And the Rangers really kind of pushed, this doing the best at, your best at everything, so that when you're in a difficult situation, you're not just doing something haphazardly. So I think that was a big part of it. Training at that time in the early 90s was significantly different than training now. And even with things like hearing a bullet crack as it goes past you, like I never heard that before. Our ranges weren't set up where we were shooting in close enough contact with one another that you could really hear the crack of a bullet and understand what that was. Yeah, we didn't have the same equipment. We weren't wearing things the same way. We didn't have body armor back then. We didn't get it until Delta Force gave it to us to wear over in Mogadishu. So, it wasn't like we got a chance to run around in body armor and understand how that would slow us down, or how that would help us, not be able to jump over a wall, or things like that, getting in and out of a vehicle, wearing body armor and all of that stuff. We didn't do any of that.
Got it. Brad, you spoke about, you went to airborne training. Also, I've seen some of your photos where you were, sitting in an aircraft. So how was your first experience when you, jumped out of an aircraft? How did that feel like for you?
Scary. Yeah, very, very scary. I didn't mind jumping. So there are two different kinds of airborne operations in the military. There's static line, where you're at a very low level, you jump out of the aircraft, your parachute is attached to the plane, so that when you jump out, it pulls your parachute for you. You have a very quick ride to the ground. You can't really control your canopy, so you kind of land wherever you land. And that's a completely different experience than military free fall. And military free fall, jumping out at 25,000 feet at night, wearing oxygen with all kinds of stuff strapped to you, is a completely different thing. And, that takes a lot more skill and a lot more experience. And I enjoyed that a lot. Static line jumping, I didn't enjoy as much. It was just, it was a means of getting to where you needed to get. And once you do enough of them, you kind of get comfortable with it, and it's a lot different. But you do, in airborne school, you do 5 jumps before you graduate. And it's very, you land in soft dirt. They have a nice field that's soft, and you don't have a bunch of equipment on. You're not flying around in a plane for 5 hours beforehand. You're just taking off and going right to the drop zone and jumping. So it's a very, quick thing. But once you get to your unit, if you're going to an airborne unit, then you experience all of the other stuff, like sitting on the tarmac, waiting for the plane to get there, and you have your parachute on, and you're drinking water, and you can't go to the bathroom, and now the plane's there, and it's nighttime, and we fly around for 3 hours, and people are getting sick, and the doors come open, and it's pitch black in the aircraft, and I'm making my way to the door, and all that stuff. It's a completely different experience.
Got it, Brad. Brad, you have served around 20 years in the military. If I can ask you, any 3 life lessons that you have learned from your experience in the military, from combat or battlefield, what would they be? Any 3?
Yeah, really, I think it comes down to being a good teammate and understanding how to be a good team member. Being a leader is a lot different than being a follower. And you can learn a lot about being a good follower and how leadership and everything like that happens. Yeah, I think it's camaraderie. It's, how I felt being a part of a team that was doing special things, and how that kind of helped me with relationships probably after the military too. Even I still like that small team, group of people hanging out. It's still kind of the same thing. And then I think I mentioned the big learning lesson I think I mentioned before, which is do your best at everything that you do. It's easy to blow off little things that you don't think are important, but all that means is you're not doing as good as you can possibly do. So I try and be my best at everything.
Got it. So if you could also, when you spoke about the team culture and the camaraderie, if you would compare, how was it different when you were in Delta Force compared to the Rangers?
I think it was probably more competitive in Delta Force, and just it's kind of the best of the best. So once you get to that level, you're dealing with people that are very talented, and they're the best shooters, they're the best performers physically, they're very quick thinkers and things like that. Yeah, I feel like they're pretty equal, just at a different level, and maybe the difference between being on a team of high school footballers versus a team of professional footballers, there's kind of more at stake the higher you go, and making mistakes aren't as much of an option. They kind of expect you to make mistakes and things like that when you're younger and learning and things like that. So at Delta Force, there wasn't really the option of, hey, I can screw this up and make mistakes, and they'll get me there. It was a lot more, hey, you got to perform every day.
Got it.
Yeah, definitely different.
So Brad, currently you are a musician. If you could speak about that, and also what are the various skills that you learned from the military which help you transition now into a civil life? What would that be?
I talk about this a lot, actually, on a lot of the podcasts that I do and things like that. And I feel like I never fully identified with just being a Delta Force operator. It was a part of who I was, but it's not my whole world. I'm other things. I'm a guitar player. I'm a father. I'm a husband. there are all these different things. And so when I transitioned out of the military, I wasn't losing my whole identity. I was losing one part of my identity. And I think there are guys that gets taken away from, right? Like if someone's injured on the battlefield and they can't continue to serve, it's kind of taken away from them. I didn't have that. I got to pick my way. I picked when I wanted to get out. I was ready to get out. I was ready to, have new challenges and do something new and challenge myself and learn new things and meet new people and all of that. So my transition, I felt like was a fairly smooth one.
Got it. So Brad, since you were special forces operator, my final question to you would be, what was your favorite weapon back then in combat?
Wow. There are so many. I carried an M249 saw in Mogadishu, and I shot a lot of ammo through that thing. I guess somewhere about 5,000 rounds in the 18-hour battle, and that's a lot of ammunition to burn through. I liked the 40 millimeter, little handheld 40 millimeters that we were carrying, because you could do a lot of damage with those too. That was fun to carry. I carried my customized M4 that I got. You can see it in all my social media pictures. Yes. As a Delta guy. You can see but I carried that gun into a lot of places and a lot of targets, and you kind of become attached to it. So I love that gun. It was almost like a part of me. And I love my 45 pistols that I carried in Delta Force too, 45 caliber 1911s. So there were a lot of things that I loved, but my favorite one would probably be my M4, the customized, tricked out M4.
Got it, Brad. Brad, thanks a lot for your time on this session. It was really interesting talking to you, and you helped us understand, what life in, Rangers and Delta Force looks like. A lot of my audience will also get a perception about it. So thanks again for your time on this session.
Absolutely. Thank you.